Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Low Carb Cruise. We are with one of my favorite people. Michelle is an awesome rock star, and you're speaking today, right?
Yes.
What are you speaking about?
I'm going to talk about GLP-1s. I'm going to talk about how we can naturally increase our
Naturally
GLP-1.
do it, right?
Yeah.
I don't think people realize where those GLP-1s come from. But before we get into that, tell us more about you and how you got into the keto lifestyle.
Oh my gosh. So I'm a registered dietitian. So I actually, I know most of us, it's so funny. It's what I used to believe, but very quickly about my background, had a pretty serious eating disorder when I was 12.
I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, 5 feet tall, 57.5 pounds. So went to inpatient treatment for 60 days. And it's interesting, I was fed, I was put on a 24-hour tube feeding system, and the ingredients in tube feeding, maltodextrin, corn syrup, soy protein, are the same.
Vegetable oil too, right?
Yeah, they're the same then. I was 12, I'm going to be 42 as they are today. So
That's
highly
sad.
inflammatory. But, before I left, the doctor actually told my parents that I had a very slim chance to survive. And I was told as a 12-year-old, you don't recover from eating disorders. You're going to have lifelong anxiety, depression, racing thoughts around food. And they weren't wrong. I was very I became weight restored. But all my adolescence and through...
You thought about food?
Oh, I just felt like I was standing on the sidelines of my own life. I was constantly thinking about it, worrying about it, obsessing about it. Relapsed once to where I lost quite a bit of weight. But I wanted to become a dietitian because I knew nutrition was powerful, right?
Yeah.
I had seen myself go from very underweight to a normal weight. And I just kind of had this intuition that there was something I could do eating wise that could help my mental health, right? And of course, you go through the dietetic internship, and there's just so much that didn't make sense. I know I don't have to tell you this, but just going into, I'll never forget going into a patient room that had type 2 diabetes.
Yeah.
And my preceptor was like, we're going to teach them to eat carbohydrates consistently throughout the day so they can dose their insulin. And I would just ask questions. I was like, oh, well, since their blood sugar is high, can we teach them to eat less carbohydrates?
Right.
And I was just pegged as this difficult dietetic student, I think that's one thing that people may not understand about dietitians in the dietetics program is we are taught that, carbohydrates are necessary for every disease state. It doesn't matter if you're underweight, you're overweight, you're diabetic, and we're also taught that if you're not a registered dietitian, that you are kind of a bozo. Health coaches, all those people, absolutely
beneath
worthless. Yes. But it wasn't really until 2019 that's when I lost my health. My health completely fell apart. That I started to, I guess, explore. Kind of almost stumbled upon ketogenic and carnivore diets. So
What happened?
I was trying to qualify for the Olympic trials in the marathon.
Wow.
So
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Olympic
You're learning a
marathon.
lot about me today. So yeah, I run 19 marathons, qualified for Boston 19 times, but I really wanted
Let's race. Let's go.
Okay, right now. I'm ready.
You're
I
totally
got my
giddy.
running shoes on.
You're totally
I
giddy.
don't know.
You're
You got your
totally
sandals. I think I'll get you.
Yeah.
So, at that time, I was just eating a super high carbohydrate diet. And I was also practicing as a dietitian. And so it was really interesting because, I'm prescribing this low fat, lots of whole grains, tons of veggies. And I'm watching my patients just get sicker and sicker. But the doctors are telling me oh, it's the patients. They're not doing what we tell them to do. And you just don't have time. You have 5 minutes with people. And at the same time, I'm running 10 to 15 miles a day. And all of a sudden, I went out for a run and then my body just felt kind of achy. And I was like, oh, it's just a weird day. But it kept happening. And I remember driving to work and I had to pull over. I broke out in a cold sweat. And I got my iron check. Everything was normal. And so I reached out to, my doctor, sports dietitians, and everybody told me, you need more carbohydrates. You're probably eating too much protein and fat. Not even maybe 70 grams of protein, 50 grams of fat. And at the time I was eating 300 grams of carbs. And they said, oh, you should eat 400, you should eat 500. As you can imagine, that didn't go particularly well. And so my come to Jesus moment, so once again, working at the hospital in Portland, and I was covering oncology, and we had a really young patient pass away. And so I came home early, fell asleep on the couch, woke up and it was 2 a.m. And my body just hurt. Everything hurt. My joints hurt, my heart was racing, my anxiety. And I think a lot of people experience that where you're just I've done everything I was supposed to do.
Yeah.
And I was out of answers. I don't know what to do. I can't And so I drove to 7-Eleven, got like 30 pounds of ice, put it in the bathtub, and it's like, 3 in the morning, and I'm crying in this ice bath. And that's when, my wife came in and was like, maybe we should do something different.
Yeah.
And that's when I'm like, I'm done. At that time I was 36. I'm like, I'm not running anymore, trying to qualify. This is a young person's game, this marathon training. Yeah. And it's so funny because you never think like that moment is going to be like this pivotal changing point. And it was literally the next day I was like, well, if I'm not running, maybe I should eat less carbs. I intuitively knew they didn't make me feel well, but I just, my whole, from being anorexic to being a dietitian, like you have to have them. So I was scared. And I was also scared, like, God, if I eat a lot of saturated fat, am I going to have energy? Am I going to get sick? But I think thankfully, I was curious, and I, got online, did some research. I was going to do keto, ended up doing carnivore for 30 days and changed my life. Within 3 weeks, Corinne, who's my wife, told me, like, this is the best your anxiety has been in the 11 years that I've known you.
That's great.
And it was so, and of course, then you almost get angry, like you can't unsee it. I started to dive into, like, do we have clinical trials? And we do. At that time, we had so much on type 2 diabetes. And I very naively thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to change how we teach in our hospital. So I printed all this stuff out and did this big presentation for our clinical director. I was like, we can get people off medications. We can help people. And they didn't give me the time of day. They were like, oh, that's great. Glad that's working for you. And you have to continue to, do the standard. You can't work here.
Are you still licensed?
Mm-hmm. I am still licensed, but I don't practice in a hospital anymore. Okay.
Because I'm surprised they even let you still have your license. Because they're taking it away for so many doctors.
Yeah, well, they made it very clear that this was, it was not something that could be taught. Like, we had to teach the standard of care. And so, I will neither confirm or deny that I would go into patients' rooms and say, like, hey, I'm going to chart that I'm teaching you this, but would you like me to tell you what actually works? And, that didn't go over well. No. Somebody could talk to their nurse about it.
Wow.
So...
Hey everyone, we are on a little safari here in Africa, and I got a little friend right behind me here, eating some grass and some trees. He's not a carnivore, but if you are, it's great to keep your electrolytes up, and especially when you travel, if you keep your electrolytes up, it really helps. I actually personally find I don't go number 2 as often if I don't bring my electrolytes on along when I travel. I'll go 2-3 days without, but Element is great for travel. It's easy to pack. We really like it. And if you go to drinkelement.com, oh, watch out, /Keto Maria, you can get a free sample pack with order. So check it out, drinkelement.com /Keto Maria, and get a free sample pack with any order.
I remember I ended up in the emergency room. This is a long time ago. And they're like, do you have any allergies? And I said, sugar. Because I was afraid they were going to put like an IV of sugar in me. I was like, I'm allergic to sugar. They're like, sugar? I was like, yep.
Yeah, it's wild. Well, and it's crazy that the cognitive dissonance too of dietitians, because as I was eating this way and as I was learning more about this, and as, my physical body just felt a million times better. I wasn't in pain anymore. I could go for long periods of time without eating. I was finally sleeping, but I just felt present. Like, I could actually, like, I'm talking to you right now.
Yep.
When I was with my patients, I was always like anxious. Like, it's hard to describe to somebody who hasn't experienced anxiety, but it's kind of like this constant,
Were you thinking about food or what?
Sometimes, I certainly, as someone with a history of an eating disorder, was like, should I eat more? Should I not? Should I whatever? That was always in the back of my head. But I was also thinking, as a high achiever, like, I got to get to this patient, kind of almost worrying about the next step every single day. Yeah. It was pretty wild. And, but yeah, it was probably about, 3 weeks into this or so that, I wasn't running, so I was home more. And finally, Corinne was like, maybe you should go for a run. Because I was just...
Oh my gosh, I've been told that many times.
You need to go. You got all this energy. And you know what it is, because I was like, great. Because I used to be gone. And I was scared because I was like, God, I haven't been eating any carbs at that time. And I was like, you know what? I need to get over the ego. Like, let's just go. And I ran 8 miles and I felt fine.
Did you still run?
Yes. Now well, in Korean, I told her, I was like, look, I ran and I feel great. And she's like, oh my God, you're going to be a recreational runner. We're going to go and you're going to run and I'm going to take pictures. And I was like, what if I do ultra running? What if I do more than a marathon? And she was not excited about that at first. And to be fair, like,
it takes a lot.
It takes a lot. And she had seen me, you know, it wasn't a pretty ending to the marathons. You know, I was in a lot of pain. There were a lot of tears.
Did you lose a toenail?
Right now I'm missing about 4 or 5. So.
Oh, really? Look at that big one. That looks so gross.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Off. Well, yeah. And so I did my first ultra. And so that was another thing. I was like, can you run fat adapted? And so I connected with Zach Bitter, who at the time had the 100-mile world record.
We interviewed him too.
Yeah, he's amazing. He's my coach. And it's just like this diet, this way of eating, let me dream again. Like I started to like, let's try this. And so, yeah, I won my first ultra. And this, talking about the cognitive dissonance, at the time I was still in the hospital setting. And one of the dietitians, you know, my mental health has improved. I'm, you know, physically, you know, I gained muscle mass. I was, you know, I just won a race. And she pulled me aside and said, you know, I don't think all this meat you're eating is good for your health. This is an obese dietitian, right?
Yeah.
It was like, wow. But anyways, yeah, so, you know, I left the hospital, you know, I wrote my book, and it just kind of, you know, for the last several years has been like a hustle with consults. But now I work with Dr. Mariella Glant at Ona Health, which is very similar to like Berta.
Okay.
So like through an app, I get to do low carb counseling.
That's cool.
And yeah, and I get to just do some amazing things. And yeah, I've run 6 ultras now.
Wow.
And
it's getting loud in here.
no, I'm sorry, run 8 and 1 6. So.
Nice.
Yeah.
You won them.
I did.
Dude, you're so faster than I am. I won one race, and it was like a small town, like
That's fun though.
the Crappie Dash or something.
I
It was
love
like
it.
by a lake. Okay, so with your background of anorexia, how do you feel about intermittent fasting or OMAD or extended fasting?
I think you have to be very careful.
Yep,
you know,
I do.
Anytime you are, it's kind of like in general, I feel like the carnivore, the ketogenic diet is very contextual. Like for example, you know, I eat probably 50 to 100 grams of carbs. I'm an ultra runner.
Yeah, Zach Bitter does too.
Yeah, oh yeah, he even goes higher than that at times.
But he's still on ketosis.
Yeah, exactly. Well, but somebody who maybe is
Sedentary?
yeah, or has very high A1C, is diabetic, they are going to vastly benefit if they're obese from doing some intermittent fasting, you know. But I think with someone with a history of an eating disorder, you know, I'm very careful. Like I don't, you know, I eat 3 times a day.
I do too.
I don't want to mess around with it. And most of the women that I consult, I would much rather people be consistent,
Right.
you know, and certainly with OMAD, I think it's very difficult for women often to get enough calories and get enough protein. So.
I lost a lot of muscle mass doing OMAD. What is with the microphone? Okay.
Yeah.
Great. I don't know if they can hear this, but
That's all
we'll
right.
just keep going.
Yeah.
Just talk a little louder.
Okay.
Because I lost muscle mass doing OMAD, and I hate feeling really full. Like I don't like that feeling.
Yeah.
And I talked to Nat, who was on the cruise too, about OMAD, and she's like, you know, you're hungry, you're pushing it, and then you binge.
Yeah,
right?
you eat a lot.
And I didn't like to feel full. I just feel much better eating, you know, 3 smaller meals rather than one giant one.
Yeah, I found for me, especially because I'll do most of my running, I do my running mostly fasted, you know, in the morning, that I'm pretty happy having. I almost do like 2 larger meals, like a larger meal like after running, and then a larger meal in the evening, and then kind of like a smaller midday meal. And I find most people find some type of structure around that where they do. But once again, if you are, it is contextual. For people I work with that are very obese or very type 2 diabetic, we might wait and have them do that intermittent fasting where they only eat twice.
Well, you're still young, but when you go through menopause, I want you to contact me, and I bet you don't run fasted anymore.
Oh, interesting.
I bet you don't.
Okay.
The whole cortisol, because when your hormones are tanking, cortisol's elevated, so that running fasted, that's a stressor,
For
right?
sure. Oh, yeah.
And it just makes it, just about every woman I've talked to who has been going through the change, they've stopped doing that.
Yeah, and I mean, one thing that I will say is I'm always open to growing, learning, changing.
I used to run
evolving.
fasted all the time.
Yeah.
Like I ran marathons fasted.
Well, and I would never do the whole thing. I start my runs fasted.
Yeah.
So
I don't feel good when I eat before.
Oh yeah, I mean, I do fat. Like I'll have MCT, I'll have coconut oil like in my coffee, and then I'll get about 40 minutes into a run for long runs, and then I'll start dosing with carbs because I'm just trying to avoid an insulin response into running, so I can make sure I oxidize as much fat for fuel as possible. So.
Very cool.
Yeah.
How do you feel about, do you know about the sugar diet?
I do, you know, and I've talked to, I would say people I would consider much smarter than I am, like Nick Norwitz, you know, and you will you can absolutely lose weight when you keep your, you can kind of do either. You can have the higher fat, lower carb, or you can have the very low fat, very high carb.
Protein's not an energy source. Fats and carbs are. So you pick one.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. And there's some mechanisms, that potentially seem like they're really working for people. Of course, my concern and my immediate thought is we are a population where 93% of us are metabolically unhealthy.
Right.
And, we know that fat is essential, essential fatty acids, protein is essential. I also think that however we eat, I think it's best to structure it in a way that you want to do long term.
Yeah.
And I worry about people eating massive amounts of carbohydrates. And once again, I did this, massive amounts of carbohydrates for a very long time. Yeah, I don't think it's a good thing. If you're a metabolically healthy person, maybe you're like a super athlete and you're like, you know what, I want to have more carbohydrates. I want to try this out. I want to flex in and out. I don't necessarily think it might be a bad thing to experiment or play around with. A long term, I think it's a nightmare, to be honest.
Well, I think there's different sugar diets.
Sure.
And some of them are doing look at my salad. It's a bowl of candy with food dye. And
see, that's terrible. That's
Yeah.
not, and I have heard like Mark
Mark
Bell,
Bell.
he's been doing some a lot of fruit or a lot of other things. But again, I don't know Mark.
His salad was a bowl of candy.
See, and there's he made a post that said that saturated fat directly contributes to insulin resistance, and we have no evidence of that.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, you do. When people eat so much fat, I've seen it in my practice. Their triglycerides are going through the roof. Did you watch my presentation?
I did.
At the end, all of those testimonies, there was about 100 of them. All those testimonies are people who did. So here's the thing: when you're already in a metabolically unhealthy state,
Okay, there's that.
and they eat more fat, even zero carb,
Yeah.
their insulin resistance gets worse because you're filling those fat cells, right? And the insulin can't work anymore.
So definitely a difference between someone who's metabolically healthy and unmetabolically healthy.
Right, but his point is true, because even in the comments they're like, yeah, look at Maria Emmerich, she talks about that all the time. It's true. I don't think that we should be telling people. There's a lot of carnivores out there that are telling people just eat the ribeye with a stick of butter, BBB, eat that, and they're already type 2 diabetic. It's going to make it worse. They need to eat leaner proteins.
Well, it's interesting because we've seen working at Ona Health. Working once again with a lot of type 2 diabetics, I have seen people that do, and protein is obviously, I'm a huge protein advocate, very, very important. But, we do see sometimes people who eat just protein and not enough fat, women especially, and can end up with issues, So.
I don't recommend doing that long term, but I am a big fan of protein sparing modified fasting. But you do that 1 or 2 days a week.
Yeah.
It's not an ongoing thing.
Exactly. And I think that's where people get in trouble, is where sometimes people will latch on to one thing and be like, I'm only doing this, where it's like, well, we got to be careful.
No, I'm very clear about it's not a 7-day-a-week thing.
Got you. Yeah.
I don't know. Anyway, the sugar diet is a boo.
Yeah, we both agree that that's not
That's
ideal.
a boo, yeah. So why don't you tell me, you worked with so many people, what is one of your favorite testimonies? Inspire people.
Oh my gosh. The first one that came to my mind was I worked with a woman who, from the UK, who she contacted me. She'd been dealing with binge eating disorder. And she said, I've been 17 years, hadn't gone a single day without binging and purging. And she said she'd tried all these different things, support groups, and seen several dietitians, doctors, but once again, everybody was doing some version of the standard American diet. And she said for so long, she was told this is restricted, keto, you can't do this as someone with eating disorder. And she's like, she came across some, I think Chris Palmer, some of his work, and she's like, can you help me with this? And I was like, all right, let's do it, let's set it up. And we got her, ketogenic diet. And she contacted me a week later. She's like, it's been 3 days. That was for her, the first thing is I haven't done this in 17 years. And she made one of 3 months without having,
that's great.
And she was like, my mind, it's just, I'm not hungry. I don't feel that full. And of course, as she was getting better, one of the biggest things with eating disorders, it certainly doesn't erase your trauma or the reasons, but as she felt better, she finally felt the energy to deal with some of that stuff. She's like, I contacted my doctor, I'm going to get some help, I'm getting more resources. And I will say, as amazing as that story is, a sad thing about the story is she actually set up a physical. Like, hey, I need to get my health checked out. It's been a really long time. And when she went to talk to her doctor, she sent me this really long email that her doctor, said, well, what are you doing? Blood work looks great, everything's great. And she told the doctor, I'm doing a ketogenic diet. And the first response was, that's dangerous, and to basically, after 17 years, having a 3-month period of remission, and they said, that's dangerous.
And she stopped?
No, she kept going.
Oh, good.
But she was just super angry, frustrated,
Right. Find a new doctor.
Yes, yeah, do it. You can fire your doctor.
COVID brought on a lot of good things, such as online help.
Yes.
So there's so many doctors that can help in 50 different states.
Mm-hmm.
They can do virtual consults. They can get your labs done locally and then get sent to them. Like, it's all, you have the power to choose, right?
Yeah, and that's what I said. You never want to be working with somebody who doesn't believe in what you're doing.
Yeah.
That's going to be a rough relationship. So
Yeah. Well, where can everybody find you besides running?
Yes, find me out running and right around Portland, Oregon. So I have a website, thedietitiansdilemma.net. So it's my book, The Dietitian's Dilemma. I have a kid's book too called The Fox Family Food Fight, which
Get it for your kids
I'm
or
really
your grandkids.
excited. Yeah, I feel super fortunate that
Is it on Amazon?
It is.
We'll have the link.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I had that book fully funded. So any of those sales, I started where the money goes directly to, we have a local farmer right outside of Portland, Oregon, and we buy regenerative beef from him, and it goes straight to the food bank. So
it goes straight to the food bank. Like, how cool is that? That's so awesome.
Thank
so
you.
Support people, and we hope will you be on the cruise next year?
I hope so. Yeah, they'll have me.
We hope to see all of you guys on the cruise next year, because it is a good time.
Oh my gosh, it's amazing.
Yeah,
so gorgeous.
Bye, everybody. When I was 16 years old, I was diagnosed with PCOS, acid reflux, depression, and IBS. Instead of taking those prescription drugs, I decided to change my life with food. Yes, food healed me, and it's healed so many of my clients over the past 20 years of working with people. If you are interested in transforming your life, check out KetoMaria.com. I'd be honored to help you.